we're starting to do an environment, we'll receive a concept from our concept artist. And they do this elaborate, crazy drawing that looks really cool. And then from that, Design already has their design laid out. It's basically like a sheet. You just a bunch of blocks and boxes that gameplay's already in there, it already works. From there, we go over it and we start building our level with it. You know, we layer on geometry, the hills, mountains, whatever's gonna be in there, and incorporate all that into the sheet so it all plays together nice and make it look pretty.
Every corner in the game is pretty much unique. It's handcrafted, and that's the difference. You look at other games, it's an assembly line, it's mass produced. They'll build a crate and then you'll see that exact crate hundreds of times throughout the game. You don't get that in God of War.
Good people here. Everybody's really talented, super talented, but nobody has an ego or anything like that, so it's great. Well.
What's gratifying for me is coming in every day and actually liking the job that I'm doing. You know, I bore my girlfriend with, you know, how I'm gonna, you know, make this sweet piece of metal like even sweeter. I enjoy talking about it, she hates it.
Biggest challenge is getting it done on time.
You lose sense of what starts to look into you and you actually need other people's eyes to tell that. And I think working with a team of guys that are always open to giving you advice and telling you, hey, this looks great, or hey, maybe this could be worked on a little bit, really makes the art come out to look a lot better.
I'm going to show you an example of how we do collision. So here's the basic level that we're working on right now, and then we have the stuff we call sheet, which is the real basic collision stuff that Kratos walks and runs on. So this is actually built by a designer. This gives us the basic places where he needs to run and defines kind of the gameplay spaces. And then we build our art over that. So what we then have to do at a later point in development is go in and make sure there's a cylinder around here and there's a cylinder around here, and that we make sure that we put in little divots into this collision so that he doesn't get stuck on things or walk through things. And then here you can see where he is walking, there is collision. But if you look carefully right now, because the sheet isn't actually finished, his feet move through little places in the ground and things like that. And because like there's wall, we have collision right there, he can't go through this wall, but we don't actually have any collision on this pillar, so he's gonna go weep and walk right through. So eventually that's what we'll have to do, is make sure that all that stuff is in there and that he can't walk through these pillars, and that's what collision is.
This is a concept by Cecil Kim, and it's the exterior of the top of Mount Olympus with the Zeus statue there, and that's where you're going to be fighting Zeus. And this is another piece that I asked Cecil to do for me, and it's a top-down of the ground. That's when concept art really comes in handy, because we have to do so much ground that Kratos is transitioning over that it's really nice to get some fresh ideas. And I'll take his drawing here and then start fleshing it out and coming up with crazy marble and gold. And he had this cool feather idea. You get dirt and stuff picking in between the feathers, adding, I guess, an extra layer of filth to the world. You build it clean first, and then I'm gonna go in here and destroy it and make it look like a fresh battle has happened in it.
Here's an example of a piece in Tartarus. This is a gate that basically raises up on these chains from the side. This is a pretty detailed piece from what we would normally get from a concept artist. We'll get, you know, big vista shots, and then if it's an important piece, we'll get something like this to sort of detail out what it should look like. So this is what I'll get. My first step after that is to figure out these shapes in 3D. I'll create something like this. This is just a wireframe, you know, just like any video game. You know, nothing too special about it. We bring this into a high poly modeling program to really add a lot of the detail and like the grit and the texture. This works a lot like real clay. You can see how I can just sort of work over it and obviously not be that sloppy, but that allows me to get all this detailing and stuff in. Once we get it to that point, we end up getting all that high poly detail as a texture. And you can't really see it too well on here, but I brought it up on this screen. You can see how a lot of that high detail gets transferred on there. That's really kind of one of the big cornerstones of all this next-gen stuff.
This is one of the Hades levels. You can see right here, it consists of a large room and then a series of halls with little torch things in there. This is pre-lit, this is just the polygons. In this game, we are pushing a lot of polygons. The environments are At least this one is probably twice the size of a God of War 2 level in terms of polygons, and probably 4 times larger in textures. If you look at the screen here, this is the level after it's been initially lit. You see we have a nice bloom going on now, which we just got. So you can see the softness that you have along all the lights. Before, lighting used to be really harsh. The bloom just gives it kind of this real world foggy effect. Just gives the scene a nice softness to it. Gives it kind of a cinema quality. Eventually his lighting will match the environments and it'll look really nice.
What I've been working on lately is building the environment for a movie trailer. So it's been a little different than building a regular environment. I've imported the camera and I scrub through what the camera's going to see, and I just make sure my environment fills in all the gaps. This is the base layer of what will ultimately be a pretty dense forest. This is constantly what I do. I'll just scrub through the animation, see where the camera goes, make sure I have enough detail in certain areas. If I don't have enough detail, or if you see obvious seams, I'll either cover those up or I'll consider how fast the camera's actually flying through this, and will it all be blurred out anyway, and I won't worry about it. This scene is a little more detailed than a regular environment would be, just because it is a rendered movie. So that's the end of this camera, and then it continues on.
This is the concept that we get, and basically this is an overall of the entire level. It's a big cave, and you have these rock pillars. You got your cave with the waterfalls. You know, it has little details in there, but it gives you the whole picture. You get your rocks, the greenery, the waterfalls, and then the architectural bridges. This is basically the sheet that we get from the designers, and that's the basic layout that we start with. And from there we start building the actual rock and geometry on top of the sheet. You have gameplay that you can go along with as you're building your levels to see exactly where the camera views are going to be and what you need to build out. Here's an example of where I start. I have all these rocks. This is going to be a whole rock level. You have a massive level on scale compared to any of the other ones we did in God of War 1 and God of War 2. And it's all very detailed rock geometry. It takes a long time to cut all this stuff in and make it look pretty.
Here we have the original concept art that was for the grate that I designed and modeled in 3D. So here in ZBrush, obviously, I added some rope detail. Whether it was a rope or not in the concept, it looked I tried to get as close as possible, so I just assumed it would be a rope. So that's what I did here, and obviously we have some of the nails going inside. This is what it came out to be. We knew we wanted a different color than what we had in the original concept, so you notice the color is a little different. We could actually bring it up to the PS3, and we can take a view of what it would look like at game. So back here is like the original model, and then here is the detailed version of that.
This is one of the pieces of concept art for the Olympus hub at the top of Mount Olympus. I'm in the process of arting it. You can see a lot of stuff is still just the gray blocking pieces, but starting to get some of the detail. Pretty much the way they have our tools set up, anything I build here, I can within reason quickly send it over to the development kit. I can send the entire level over so I can run around and play and interact with the environment. I can also take chunks of the environment, send them over just so I can kind of view a specific section that I'm working on. Still a lot of the gray areas I need to go in and fill in the details. You can see this down here still all needs to be done. This is kind of our art sheet version, which kind of block in the basic shapes and spacing and everything. These things we put in our level, they're scale versions of Kratos that we use just to make sure we're keeping our scale correct when we're building the stuff, so details don't get too out of whack.
To me, level design basically is creating an interactive narrative within each level that the player can engage in and essentially play through.
Level design is taking the story and premise of the game and then translating it into a more tangible form that the player can experience.
Basically kind of figuring out how to lay out the gameplay to, always have the carrot dangling in front of the player's head and kind of get them to the next part. What do you think?
I think that sounded amazing.
The script is
pretty well written out, so you get a really good written description of what's going on, like what Kratos is doing, what's happening in the story. You just kind of go from there.
I get a lot of flack because I say that we put the fun in the game, and I think that's really what we do in a nutshell.
One of the greatest things about game design is that you're able to take an idea that's in your head and make someone go and experience that.
We have so many tools in this universe and so many tools as far as what the game is built off of that we can pretty much do what we want. You know, we're limited by our imagination, and I think that's one of the most fantastic things about working on this project.
As a designer here at Sony, you can't just be good at one thing. It's really in our hands to do it all and do it well.
We often try to integrate the puzzles into the exploration of the level and with the combat. You're going to have a lot of games where all of a sudden you're in your fight mode, and once that's done, then you're in your puzzle mode, and it almost feels like you're playing two different games. One thing we try really hard to do here is to mesh those different kinds of game designs so we get a really more fluid and dynamic gameplay experience.
We essentially drive the vision of the level from the player's perspective and serving as the ambassador to them. So we need to protect their interests and make things easily understandable for them as they're playing through the level. I mean, do you agree?
It's a constant push-pull as well with the designers and the artists, because the artist may want to put something that's visually more interesting in, but it could also impact the play space in a negative way.
I can't emphasize enough how important playtesting is to our process. If we didn't have it, the game would not be what it is. Because when the player takes the product home, we don't want them to be frustrated.
You learn so much just watching people play it. That's one of the most valuable things you could ever do, is just sit down, give the person the controller, and just watch them play, see what they do.
I think one of the strongest things that this team has actually is having, you know, the game director come in and play it, have members from all the disciplines sitting down, and because everybody, you know, chips in, hey, how are we going to animate this? Animators are sitting in. How are we going to build this? You know, world builders are sitting in. Is this even possible? Coders are sitting in. That process makes everything just improve immensely, and I truly, truly mean that. I think a lot of people will say that, but here, it's extremely, extremely, extremely noticeable.
And this is some ideas that I had for a grapple section where basically Kratos would grapple onto a broken column, and that would cause it to fall over, and he would be rolling down the hill with it and climbing up. Kratos hits a grapple point, swings around this column, lands on the backside, which has it to tilt over. It starts rolling down a hill, and he has to scurry up it using his climb. He gets on top and then jumps off to land on a platform before the thing rolls off a cliff. So that's kind of just some of the stuff that we think. And when we talk about big moments, this is some of the stuff that we deal with. I have no set process. I'll go from paper to computer to design sheet and then back to paper. It's really kind of organic. I love this idea. There was another version where we had a Titan actually holding onto it and like eating as it's rolling down, like trying to bite you like it's a piece of corn. That unfortunately didn't make it into the game, but one of the things is just because I love an idea doesn't necessarily make it the best fit for the game, and being willing to understand that and walk away from certain things that don't necessarily fit, you know, that's part of the job.
This is my grandpa's old man puzzle. It's one of these kind of puzzles you got to figure out how to kind of put it together, but this kind of gave me some inspiration for the labyrinth. So the labyrinth is like this level where there's all these different cubes, and they're kind of like strung up throughout the cave entrance. And they're all like on these pulleys and ropes, and then as you go around the level, you kind of start slowly forming your own puzzle that you're going to then go into. We came up with this idea for Gaia coming up to this rotunda where, you know, Zeus and Kratos are kind of having their last epic fight. And the player's thinking, you know, it's, you know, mano a mano. They're just going to be battling, and then Gaia kind of comes into the picture and then ends up actually like physically ripping the whole building up and then like looking at it, and then you guys start fighting inside of it. She comes up and then like rips it off, and then she, you know, comes up and crushes it and takes it apart. At the end, you guys are like fighting inside of her, and you end up killing her, and then she kind of blows up and crumbles all over Mount Olympus. For me, it's always like so amazing to be able to imagine this whole kind of crazy scenario, this whole world in your head, and then you're actually able to make it.
I've been working on the Aphrodite chamber, which is where one of the infamous lovemaking mini-games will be taking place within the larger game. This is the preliminary room that I brought up in Maya. Roughly what's going to be happening is Kratos is going to be going through a hallway here where he's going to come to this room. There's going to be a bed in the corner with curtains drawn. And as soon as he casts them open, he's going to see Aphrodite with two of her very lovely servant girls who quickly run away. She's going to go into the bed for a little hanky-panky. And we see the servants are very happy right there with what's going on. After finishing his job, Aphrodite is kind enough to draw back this large curtain, which will expose the portal, which will lead to another section of the game. So that's generally an idea of how we mock up an event relatively quickly so that we can assess how the gameplay will be, and then we can forward that off to art so that they can make it pretty. And this is some of the things that concept art has done. This is the bed right here that you saw. It looks a little more fancy than the blocks that I've been using. Once that's done, I will implement them into the game, and everything will mesh together perfectly.
Be gone, Kratos.
We're in San Diego this week capturing mocap for cinematics. Stigmeti and I came down here about 4 months ago just to tour the facilities. It's really impressive down here, actually. It's a big stage. They do full body mocap. They can do hands and faces down here, and they have a ton of crazy toys. It's amazing that we have this facility that Sony owns that is basically at our disposal, and the teams here are really great.
We're suiting up. Getting her suited up for the day, yeah. Velcro custom suit we get made specifically for motion capture. We have some colored panels on there just to accentuate the actors when they're out there, just to make sure that we can see exactly what's going on instead of having an all-black suit with the all-black floor. And
this is the Gumby suit.
Ready to mocap.
Mocap is basically markers in space that are seen by cameras. They're calibrated to be able to be triangulated into a certain point in space.
It really serves as kind of a basis for us to layer animation on top of.
Got a little coffee. My shades on. This is how we do LA mocap.
Body twist, ankle and knee.
This is called the ROM, or the range of motion, where we show all of our flexibility and bendability of our body so that the computer can track our markers.
Gaia and Titans are going to be climbing up Mount Olympus, so this is our Mount Olympus right there.
Don't try this at home, kids.
As much as I've directed before was with my little sister and my little brother when we were kids, and our parents had the video camera. But it's fun. I think if you know what to do and you can communicate with people honestly and you know what you want, they love it, and people are having fun if you are. Ariel, we're going to do the following now?
We're not necessarily as concerned with perfection in really subtle movements because we know that that subtle animation is going to be done by the animators in-house. As long as we can see the character there, then we're getting what we want.
This is the real-time feed of the actual character of the motion capture being done. So you're actually seeing like a stick figure, but it's actually a skeletal figure of Richard, the actor, being out there.
We don't see your feet in that shot, so it doesn't really matter where they are. And break your symmetry if you can, so both arms aren't exactly the same.
Rolling.
All right, thank you. That was good.
Yeah, what you're actually seeing here is the mocap actor actually driving the Gaia character in real time. So
Air down.
It's definitely amazing technology.
Take two, ready. Rolling.
All right, good, thank you.
Eddie is doing well. He's been a great director. Definitely knows the shot he wants, and he gets it.
We sit at a desk all day, and I also like to move around. I think as a director, you should be able, to a certain degree, to do what your actors are doing. So you know what you're asking of them. You can show them if you have to. And, I don't know, you get closer to their performance. Don't ever put that in the making of video.
It's a
This is actually a first for me to do motion capture on a bed with pillows.
We are working on the
Sex minigame.
the sex mini game with Aphrodite. So we'll have two of the girls today just doing both the parts of the servant girls and Aphrodite, which we have blocked out. So should be an interesting afternoon. If we have time tomorrow afternoon, maybe we'll put Medi in a suit because there are some things I'm sure.
If I'm gonna do that, I'd rather do it now to do the sex minigame with Ava and Michelle.
Well, I'm not directing it if you get in a suit. That's all I
I'll
gotta
direct
say.
from the bed.
Yeah.
I'll be Aphrodite. I'll be like, you touch me here. You put your leg there. Yes. Let's do take 55. Ava? All right, let's do take 1.
Kratos, it's been far too long. Even though you are no longer the god of war, you can still share my bed. Come, Kratos. Let us forget all about Zeus for a while.
You know I cannot.
Ah, is that what has you all worked up? You are trying to figure out that bridge contraption out there. Please do not deny me this one last pleasure.
That was great. Cut.
Ah, is that what has you all worked up? You are trying to figure out that bridge contraption out there. You men and your toys.
Exactly. That's good.
I think for casting for this, Medi found people who were good with their body in terms of motion.
We picked actors that had to be comfortable with a little bit of stunt work and a little bit of naughty work.
I think everything went really smoothly.
And then we got really lucky because all the actors turned out to be great people and they got along really well, so there's a really good atmosphere.
We went out to dinner last night and had a great time, like just talking and talking about mocap and cinematics and video games, and it's just really nice to be somewhere where people appreciate all the work that goes into it.
The God of War 3 music production plan is pretty extensive. Today we're working at Skywalker Sound in Marin County. We're working with the San Francisco-based musicians from the San Francisco Symphony, the San Francisco Opera, who are phenomenal. We're really fortunate to be working with legendary engineer Leslie Ann Jones. Tim Davies has orchestrated everything, and he's conducting from the podium.
That's pretty sweet.
He really knows the music, and he really puts his all into interpreting what the composers are after.
Really pointed. Give me that nice pop on the end of each group. Here it is. Beautiful. Thank you.
The music originally comes in from the composer in what we call a mock-up, which is basically he's using his synthesizers and samplers, and we call them fake strings, fake brass, fake choir, to assemble the composition.
And then once it's approved, it comes to me to translate that and put it on paper for the orchestra. It's damn expensive to have an orchestra sitting there, so my job is to make sure that everything's spotless on the page in their language. When dealing with an orchestra as a conductor, I think 75% of it is your rapport and how you can interact with the musicians, getting them to do what you want in a highly stressful situation, making it lighthearted enough that no one freaks out, but you got to keep it moving. Give me everything you've got on those crescendos at the end of each phrase. Here it is. They're a pack, and they need a leader, and they're all brilliant musicians, but there's something about when you put an orchestra together, they need that focal point, that one person that they follow. These are pretty nasty swells where you got the flutters and everything. Feel free, if it's going to be smoother, to hit the note and then start the flutter later. Okay, here we go. They can smell when you walk into the room if you can do it and if they're going to go with you. I've been lucky that, they like me, and I've been here a lot to the ranch to conduct. And, it works really well, and they're a great orchestra.
Originally on God of War 1, we had several composers, many of whom have remained with us through the God of War series. And the reason for this is not because one composer wouldn't necessarily be able to compose the whole score. It's because the variety that their different styles bring to the table is actually a tremendous advantage.
Why are there 5 composers on this collection?
Well, that's a question for somebody else who did the hiring, because I'm sure that any one of us would be quite happy to bump the other ones off and do it all by ourselves.
And a different alternate to that answer is the reason being is because each one of us actually have a very strong voice in how we write and approach music. But generally speaking, we don't clash in styles, and therefore what ends up happening is a happy salad of the different styles that we all bring to the game, but essentially we actually work very well together as a team.
Sitting with Stig and sitting with the whole Sony crew who have they have this thing in their minds called God of War. It's an entire world. It goes beyond just characters. It's a whole, they know how they want everybody, they want the players to feel. I think what ties my music and your music and everybody else's music in is the fact that the great people at Sony, from Stig and down, is they know when it's wrong and they know when it's right. And even though we haven't heard each other's music, it ties together amazingly just because it's run through this filter, and the filter is God of War.
Right. One of the great things about scoring for video games, as opposed to film, is that there's a tremendous amount of freedom.
I'm not constrained whatsoever by any convention at all, because I think a video game is not a film. And since we're not restrained by anything that's happening at any particular point in time, it's quite a free world to actually envision what you want to write and see it through to the end.
The music actually is not only on a par with film, but in some ways surpasses most films. There's almost a requirement, certainly an expectation, that there be experimentation and innovation in video games, that the music is somehow striving to do something new and something really fresh and powerful, which isn't always the case in film.
When it comes to raw power, I mean, this actually goes to another level than most films.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we have to write music that must exist and take care of the atmosphere that you're in and add to the intensity of the battles that you're in. It's kind of carte blanche. You get to write these amazing sounding scores and have it backed by 40-plus piece string section, 20-plus piece brass sections. The sky's the limit.
We use a oversized brass section, so it's double the size of a normal standard orchestral brass section, just to give us this massive power and this huge low end. Guys that play low instruments, all they want to do is play low, and so we give them that opportunity.
You get to unleash and not hold back, because the game never holds back, never.
I talked to the orchestra and I said, if you have any moment that you have all of a sudden a feeling of lyrical beauty coming your way, ignore that completely and just go for the brutal, brutish, aggressive mentality of this score, and you'll never go wrong.
That's hugely fun. Yeah. And it's so much more fun to write bad music than to write, good music.
This is one of those games that actually lets you go all the way to the end of how big could it be, how nasty could it be. And it's great to do that. Of course, at the end of it, you just want to do a romantic comedy with some clarinets and...
That was really good.
At least as composers, we're being hired to do what we do, which is write melodic material, aggressive, edgy material that people remember. Think about when we went to go see your favorite movie as a kid, and you walk out humming the theme and you want to buy the soundtrack because it's such a great part of the experience, and that's what we're trying to do.
Is to get people to buy the soundtrack to God of War 3. Yeah, I forgot. Good point.
We did just go down to the studio, and we saw where the game's at, and the game, as you probably have just played through to unlock this video, is amazing.
I love brainstorming.
that's one of the best things about games. Right from the beginning, it's
just a creative process.
Yeah, it's fun.
What happened to the original concept art for Poseidon? No, the concept art for a Titan, a water Titan.
Can we bring it up on here? Yeah, that's fucking sweet. That's really fucking cool.
He's even got the tentacles. Whatever we come up with, it's like, hey, that would be cool if we could, and we just make it form out of water, whatever it might be.
A lot of talented people were sitting in that room figuring out, oh, this would be cool, this would be neat, throwing out all these ideas out, doing our best to trying to live up to the God of War 1 and 2 standards, which are insane.
Really high.
It's like it has to be like almost like in a shape that's like scary.
I agree with that. When you pull the camera out, what do you see? And if it is like he's turned into like a huge squid and she's all tied up or something like that. But as you're like fucking flea size and as you're running around, you see a big part of this.
Well, what do you think about maybe that whatever that thing is, it's a lot of different things?
It's everybody, you know, it's not just one person that comes to the table and has, okay, here's the perfect idea. It's everybody rifting together.
Just like the idea that Poseidon swells up with water and just becomes semi-translucent and you can see all his veins and stuff. And so that way you're actually hitting flesh.
Going off of sort of like Will's idea and a combination of the things that we talked about is his skin is basically like a jellyfish. On the inside of his body, he has all the bones. He has actually a bone structure. That way we have a creature that, you know, looks like it has some meat to it, made out of the ocean.
So I think like going off of what you were talking about, where it's like maybe you've got like reef and seaweed and stuff like that, we could probably make it look like water's running through that stuff.
I would hope that we at least all kind of get on the same page. At the end of the day today, it's like, yeah, this is kind of somewhat direction we're going to go. Maybe it starts off and a wave crashes up, and after you see like this far shot or something of a wave kind of overtaking Kratos and Gaia on the side of the mountain or something like that, you're freaking out. I was like, you're probably freaking out right now because of the cinematics. And then afterwards, guys, like, something's fucked up right now. I can't move. And then Kratos has to go out and find out what that thing is, and he runs into this one thing. It's like, what the fuck is this thing? And it's obviously connected to something else. And then he finds the other thing later on. And at the end, there's this big reveal, and it's like, "Blah!" And this is what this whole thing was that you were fighting it the whole time. I think that's cool pacing, because there's always a question in the player's head while they're proceeding. It's like, I don't know what the fuck this thing is.
When they first approached me to work on Poseidon, they told me it's going to be the very first big boss fight. Poseidon, if you remember from God of War 2, he looks more like just like a human god form. But in this game, he jumps down from Olympus into the ocean, and then he emerges out as a big water creature. This is my first sketch I did for Poseidon after doing a bunch of research on exactly what Poseidon is, the god of the ocean, the god of horses. So I thought to incorporate this design of a creature, of him being made of water and the actual waves kind of looking like horses. And then this is another one along the same veins, having a lot of horses, so just kind of going wacky. Another sketch I did was this one where I incorporated multiple Poseidon's heads throughout the design, showing that he's in control of this water tentacle. They liked this design a lot with the multiple heads, and they also liked the very first sketch with him leading the horses. They liked this one the best, so they liked this for the overall direction. They saw this, they liked the feel of this, but they didn't like the direction of the octopus limbs because of previous bosses that we've had, like the Kraken. So this is just one of the limbs of the Poseidon creature, one of the arms. This one I incorporated the multiple faces, and then a lot of the crab legs. And then this is another one I did, and this one I wanted to kind of bring back, because he's the god of horses, to kind of capture some of that feel. So eventually they decided that instead of having two different arms, you're gonna just be fighting one arm. And they also like the idea of the horse. This is the final, the very end, you're gonna be opening up his chest and revealing like this membrane, jellyfish kind of membrane, where you stab and eventually kill one of his limbs. It's later going to be revealed to you that the whole time you've been only fighting one of his limbs right here. It's going to be a really cool, big moment in the game.
Turnarounds are looking pretty nice.
Today I'm going to be having an art review. We're getting to the completion of one of the Poseidon's limbs, so I'm working on the turnarounds now.
Get the animators up here and make sure that those limbs, the front limbs, are not too long for him. Like, he'd have to raise it up so high.
To get you right below, he'd have to be, like, basically have his arms way up like this. be going down like that, and that's probably going to look a little silly. Let's have Andy finish this up. But Andy, can you save off a version of what you have right now so Adam can go over it with Bruno? And just keep on getting me up here to look at it. Cool? Thanks, man.
Thanks, guys. So we just had the review. It went well. They liked the direction, and I think a lot of it because before this is the view they've always seen, but they've never seen the front view. So for them to be able to see the front view and to see how the shape, the silhouette actually makes a trident shape, they really like that idea. I just have to finish this up. I'll probably finish it up today, and it'll be given to the modelers from there.
First time I heard about Poseidon creature was 6 months or so ago, and I heard we're gonna have a few of these huge Titan battles. This was the initial concept that was given to us. Things have changed proportionally for it to work right on screen, but it generally has the same feel. I still have a lot of sculpting left on this guy. It's a lot of this is just like the first pass. So right now I have more just the overall feel of it. Here's Kratos. He's pretty small compared to this guy. So I brought him in here just so I could have an idea of how big he's gonna be. So when it comes to details, how high res this character has to be. So you can see him, he's tiny. I just want you guys to go over and check it out before I start making all the rocks for his face, So
yeah, I think it's good. Can we make sure that we're getting like some of this smaller detail like spread out over him as well?
Okay.
Can I see the scales on the back?
Oh yeah.
It's really fucking cool.
Poseidon looks to be challenging for every department because it's so complicated. When I first saw the concept, really, I kind of looked at it and was like, what the hell are you guys doing? But that's pretty much what I say every time I see one of these crazy concepts anyway. You just go to your desk and beat your head against the table and figure out how the hell you're going to pull it off.
Poseidon definitely falls into that class of one of those kind of surprises that I know is coming down the pipe. A lot of water, and that's kind of one of my worries because making good water is hard.
We have to start off God of War 3 with a bang, and that's Poseidon. And Poseidon's going to be a water creature, so we have to make water look good on that character. I started doing some research on how we can make a character feel as if he's basically a waterfall, if there's water running down him. And I spent a couple hours, and I've put together the model that's behind me on the screen here. We basically want to try to prove the technology that we can make a model look like it has water running down it. So we don't have the Poseidon model built yet, but we have Zeus. Poseidon is Zeus's brother. They'll probably have similar type proportions. So he was a good test. This is a shader that I put together. It's pretty crazy with all these different connections. There's several different neural maps that are scrolling on top of each other. This probably took me 3 hours to set up the shader on top of an existing model. So where I want to take this now is I'm going to give it to the effects department, and I want to see like chunkier spraying water kind of coming down off of him. And then basically any area where water hits the surface, we just want to get little particle spray coming off to, just give this thing more of a volume, more water volume.
When I started on it, we had already established what Poseidon was going to look like, what the creatures that you're going to be fighting was going to look like, what Gaia was going to look like. We had the Gaia model. The Poseidon creature model was still in the process of being built. One of the quick things that's very surprising to the player, I guess, will be that right there is how big Kratos is. And that's Gaia. And this will be the initial fight combat tutorial. At that point, Gaia will change her animation and she'll start climbing on the mountain differently to allow the player to be able to walk down her arm. And the Poseidon intro will happen. The player will continue along after that. She'll be in a different pose. He'll walk over here, he'll do just a little jump, come down here, fight some more enemies, and then he'll walk up to here, and this is where the Poseidon horse creature encounter happens. So this is the first thing the player will see when he loads up the game. We're trying to frame her hand and show that she's climbing up Mount Olympus, which is just roughed out right here. And then we also want to find a way of getting her head in the shot and having her head bob around and sway. After the player works his way down Gaia, this will be the first big encounter that he experiences. The Poseidon creature will burst out, knock Gaia's hand back. He'll have to fight it. We're concerned with the player experiencing this new creature that he has no clue as to what it is. And the first thing he's doing is fighting it in a way that he doesn't feel comfortable. This is the first Poseidon creature encounter, and this right here is the first CS move kill for it, where he snaps its jaw. And at this point, The creature pulls away through Gaia's arm. Kratos attaches to him, and then as the creature's falling, he jumps off. He'll transition onto Mount Olympus.
The Poseidon encounter is very much like you're riding the Colossus from God of War 2, and you're fighting the Hydras on top of the Colossus. It's kind of incorporating all of those elements that worked really well in the previous God of Wars, but also raising the bar because it's even more epic than could ever withstand before. This is what I was delivered, the thing you encounter within 5 minutes of starting the game. This is essentially a rough version of the model. It's a pretty good start. It's got all the features like this stretchy tail, which is pretty cool. Even has stretchy neck, which lets me do some crazy stuff with it. Since this creature is supposed to be made essentially out of water, he needs to be fluid and flexible. Then he's got this trident section back here. He uses that to maybe discharge lightning at the player or, you know, do something very Poseidon-esque. This is the scene with Gaia and the tentacle creature and Kratos. And you may ask, where is Kratos? Well, he's in here somewhere. He's this little tiny dude right here. There's Kratos. I see him. So you can imagine trying to get the camera in here in the right place is kind of a challenging task. Plus, the floor is Gaia, and Gaia's moving around, so adds a lot of complexity just to the elements of trying to get everybody lined up. You encounter this beast multiple times, so you fight him first and you wound him and he retracts away and escapes, and then you come back and then he's on another point in Gaia. And then finally you realize that wasn't even the monster, that was just a small piece of the monster. And you get up to Gaia's head, and that's where you encounter the full force of Poseidon. This is the actual Poseidon creature. This is Gaia's head here you're standing on. This thing has 10 arms and legs, kind of, and then it's got 3 prongs on its back. It's also got well over 20 controls just in its spine. There's a lot of stuff going on.
He's busy, but that was my first initial impression was there's a lot going on with Poseidon. The more I think about him, the more epic and grand, why not? I mean, that's kind of like a God of War boss will be, especially when you're dealing with pieces of him as you go through, and then when you come to the very end, being able to see the full glory of him and just realizing, wow, that's just a little piece of him here, and that's just a little piece of him here, and getting to the end and going, wow, he's huge. And that should be pretty epic, being little Kratos on Gaia, a Titan, versus Poseidon, a god, and they're both huge, and you're just this little guy in the middle of it that's really going to change or determine who's going to win that outcome.
Michael and I have been working on the Poseidon boss battle for a couple months now, and we've been working through the progression for the whole fight, working with Justin as well on the level design side. We're trying to get the whole layout so we have a bare bones skeleton of how things progress. It goes back and forth to have an interesting pace to the beginning of the game. We're in the first encounter of the Poseidon boss fight. We've already seen the creature come out. Poseidon boss battle is definitely something we haven't done before. There is concern, but I wouldn't be happy if we weren't concerned. There's no challenge there. What we want to do is make something that really surprises people and really gets people excited about the game. This is the initial CS move, the first CS move you do in God of War 3. Kratos is going to wrap his chains around the bottom jaw of the Poseidon creature and then eventually rip the jaw off completely.
It's better than over here, which was the initial placement.
Boob Valley.
When you're a little short, but when you're down here, it's kind of distracting.
Initially, we had Encounter 2. The creature was coming directly out of the center of Gaia, and you see 2 gigantic mountains and the creature right in the middle of Boob Valley. Everybody giggles when they saw that. So
that wasn't what we were going for.
Not at this portion of the game. We're not looking for laughs. We have the creature now coming out of Gaia's neck, and Michael came up with the idea of one of the trident pieces on the back of the creature is actually piercing through her jaw and coming out of her mouth. So she really looks like she's in peril and she's getting destroyed by this creature. From the get-go, I came up with the idea of doing the first-person kill and giving a new perspective on Kratos' kill sequences, and Michael took the idea and ran with it.
When you defeat Poseidon as his horrible watery self, you corner him down here in his humanoid form, and that's when you have to kill him off.
Immediately, everybody was just like sold once they saw it in game.
Yeah. There was a lot of skeptics too, as far as people come up to me, and I'm sure Adam too, and what are you doing? And then actually seeing it in a game, then everybody comes over and it's just like, all right, it worked.
Kratos is not so good at making friends, but he's good at killing people.
This boss battle has to end with a big finisher. And our final kill is where we're testing out these new CS moves of first-person kills. So minigame inputs right now are in a third-person camera, and then when you succeed, you get to see the impact of Kratos' attacks and see how Poseidon feels as he's getting completely torn up. He just screams really loud and then bites his ear. It's more of a nibble than a bite.
So last time we checked him out, it was just the grayscale high-res ZBrush version, and I believe the low-poly version as well. So since then, we've messed with water technology stuff, trying to make it look more like water's flowing through him. Help from like our art director, Ken, and other people trying to make the water look good. Generally though, water's pretty hard to do. It's just a combination of normal maps that scroll, like we take UVs and have them scroll, as well as parallax maps, which add the distortion, which makes it feel like it's a little deeper. After we do all the fights, get it designed, and seeing what you really see and what you really don't, and then we might have to adjust stuff from there, you know?
Poseidon is doing well right now. We've been working on it for I don't know how many months, but where we are right now is every part of the boss fight and every part of the level has a first pass right now. It's in, it's functioning. I could hand you a controller and you can play through it. Tuning-wise, it might be too hard. The animations might be placeholder, but it's there. And we have people internally play testing it. So there's people who around here picked up the controller, played it, and been like, oh, wow, this sucks, or this is awesome. And then we keep tuning it and playing around with it to that.
We have meetings every week now, so we constantly see how much there is to do. And I mean, it's close as far as gameplay-wise. It's all there. But doing stuff on the Titans is proven to be very challenging. So things that would usually take 5 minutes take 2 hours. All things considered, all the crazy shit we're doing in there, we've had to make hardly any, if any, concessions, which is pretty amazing because the scope of this thing is just huge.
This is when we finally get the reveal of Poseidon in his big, giant, epic form. So you find out that these creatures you're fighting are just part of this one, basically the ocean pulled up to Mount Olympus. Oh, Poseidon's broken.
There you go. That's how you know it's in development.
In development. And the water's supposed to be moving here and all that.
He's got no arms.
He's got no arms. You know, we have to polish this. We have to make this robust and bug-free, which that's the really scary part. But it's getting there.
When we first saw Poseidon, we were visiting the studio in Santa Monica and working with Stig, and it just blew us away that the whole screen was filled with this boss. I don't think there's ever been a boss as big as this boss. We're actually right in the midst of scoring it with Mike Regan, and it's going to be huge. We're going to pull out all the stops, 20 brass players, 53 string players, massive amounts of percussion. So we're really going to try to create a kind of a cinematic unfolding experience for that whole first gigantic boss fight.
I hope that they're just blown away by just something they'd never seen before in a game, and to me, that's my ultimate goal when I'm making games, is like hopefully to make something that people haven't experienced, and that makes your game really stick out.
The moment that I really got to play through that Poseidon level at the beginning of the game, and you remember how excited I was, like really kind of like when we first got the assets together and like we could sit down and play the things. And you could see, like, with the polish and everything, how amazing it was going to be. And that's it for me right there.
You have disrespected the gods for the last time, Kratos.
The programmer's role in the game is to help make everything a reality.
We make tools that allow the designers and artists to actually make the game.
If the designers want to do something or the artists want to do something, if they're smart, they'll consult us and ask, can we do this? And often we'll say no, and then they'll say we want to do it, and then we'll have to do it.
You give it to them, they give it to you, say what's wrong, then you give it back to them a little bit different, and then they say no, no, no.
Designers are pretty modest in their requirements. Designers are artists. They want the world.
The biggest challenge we face for this round of the game is content. The amount of content we need to put into a PS3 game is just order of magnitude bigger than we had to put into a PS2 game. And to drive that content around the studio, we just face, massive challenges.
We got a little line emitter here, and it's got these particles, and it squirts them out to the right. And they get to a certain age and they die. And one of the things we can do is we can change colour of the particle over its lifespan. Starting from bottom to top, these particles start off blue, then go green, then turn red. Now, if I was an artist, I'd make them go like orange to black to whatever to express the effect that they want to. For me, I'm a programmer, so the nice, simple programmer graphics, nice, bright, solid, simple colours so that I can see when things go wrong. If I run this within Maya, then it runs the tool code that I wrote, which is this stuff, to display on the dev kit. And hopefully, so you can see, they're never going to create anything quite like this because this is horrendous programmer stuff, but they'll take this tech and what they'll do is they'll make fire pots or lava that flows. Anything that's best rendered by creating lots of little primitives and moving them all en masse in slightly different ways that aren't just pre-baked.
This is the soul tech. These are Hades souls swimming down the river Styx. Right now they're above the river Styx, so I can see them all because the river Styx hasn't been properly watered yet. It was my task here to get them to follow the river along a bendy spline path and then ultimately to attack you. But I haven't done that part yet. Right now I'm just at the basic stage of getting them to swim down the river. The way that I did that was allow the Maya splines to be used and imported into the game, and then allow the designers to specify radii at different points of the curve. So at this point of the curve, the souls will be within that radius, and then as they come along the curve, they'll all be within this smaller radius, and then they can spread back out later here. And this is placed within the canyon just by the file structure. This loop here handles every soul. It updates all 30 of them.
QA stands for quality assurance, and what we do is we play through the game all day and find out the bugs that are going in the game and report them to all the different various production leads and creative leads around the office and make sure that everything gets fixed and there's not any big issues with the game when it ships.
It's our responsibility to make sure the game is appropriately awesome and epic.
If there is a big problem area, well, one of us will just like play that area all day long, every day, do everything you can imagine that could break the game, kind of get in the mind of what people playing for the first time, because we play it every single day. Try to do everything possible in that area with every item, every spell, and make sure it's all working and none of that's crashing the game. So this is the kind of stuff we test on before art even gets in. As you see, it's just kind of like some sheets, some blocks. You don't really see a lot. It's a pretty basic level. So you might see a level go from something like this, when it actually gets its art in, it looks a lot different. The spikes look a lot better, the walls have much more designs, you have the wood in the background, and it goes from designer sheet to something more pretty like this. And this tells you what level we're currently in. The red one is the one you're in, the blue one is the one that you're going to, the one that's loading in, and the white one is the one that you came from. It's very easy when you're writing up a bug to tell them which area it's happening in. These say any AI that are loaded in, so if any of those are loading in and out, we can tell which one's causing problems or causing the game to crash. Over here you have your coordinates, which is just where you are on X, Y, Z axis. It's useful for the artists because they can just type it in, and if we say there's no collision, there's a tree that Kratos is walking through. They don't really play the game very much, the artists, because they're constantly doing art. Down here, it's basically just frame rate, which is useful when we got one into the E3 demo. We use that a lot, and going to the final build, we'll be going through and documenting the frame rate everywhere and making sure everything is up to the right level of frame rate. We can see what areas are causing the frame rate to dip that we need to have code or anybody else go through and see if they can optimize that area.
So I've just submitted the bug, and now I'm going to try to see if I can take a video of it actually happening to reproduce it. The bug is that sometimes Kratos just won't grab onto the ledge when he does the jump. And the bugs are assigned to different priorities, and certain ones we refer to as progression stoppers, which means that if a player were to run into this bug playing through the game, they would be unable to continue. And we categorize that as an A bug. It's the absolute highest priority. So I have to make very sure that the designer gets this particular bug so that they're able to fix it, because it's very, very serious. We could get as many as 100 to 200 bugs per day during certain phases of production.
This is the opening level. This is when Gaia is climbing up Mount Olympus and you're on the back of Gaia. Art was just added to this level, so you would try to run along different areas, make sure Kratos can't pass through the world, like right here. So in this case, I would go in and give the artist the coordinates to this certain location where Kratos is inside the rock, and that artist would make a collision pass, fixing that collision so I couldn't fall through it. I'm loading the test level to test the Wraith. It's basically this enemy that burrows underground. And the only way you can actually attack him is to use the L1 and circle move, which is your grapple. When he's under the ground, I'm supposed to be able to grab him out and slam him on the concrete. But that's not working right now, so that's when I would open up my Test Track Pro and write up a bug report. It's our job to play the game over and over and over again. So after you replay a certain section a certain amount of times, it gets a little repetitive, but that just comes along with the duties of being in QA.
It certainly takes some of the romance out of it, but it's a real pleasure being able to see the game evolve day by day, step by step, asset by asset as they are implemented. It's very exciting.